Welcome back to Synergy's webinar series on climate action and tourism. My name is Jill Doucette. I'm the founder of Synergy Enterprises. And for the last 10 years, we have been working with businesses to help them measure and reduce their carbon footprint. This series covers the basics for tour operators, destinations, events, and hotels. This three-part webinar series includes how to measure your carbon footprint, how to set goals to reduce your carbon footprint, and explores the carbon offset market to eventually help you bring your business to carbon neutrality. So in this specific webinar today, we'll be exploring part 2, looking at how you can take actions to reduce your carbon footprint. So we'll be recapping how you measured your carbon footprint and look at effective ways and strategies and trends in specifically tourism for taking action and creating capacity in your organization for that change. So in our agenda today, we'll be talking about why climate action matters in tourism, and specifically why reducing your carbon footprint matters in tourism. We'll be exploring the business case for carbon emissions reductions, and we will also explore some themes in tourism. We're going to specifically relate that to the concept of drawdown. So how do we draw down our emissions as a global economy, and specifically in the tourism sector? We're going to share with you some case studies and success stories of businesses that have reduced their carbon footprint and seen measurable results. And we'll go through how you can identify your own opportunities. This is a question we get a lot. Where do I start? What opportunities should come to the top of the list? So we'll go through a strategy for that and then talk about how to put your plan into action. So recapping, we know now that tourism is responsible for 8% of global emissions, and tourism is also poised for international growth. In many nations, including Canada, tourism is growing and expanding. So if we want to have this sector last and be part of a sustainable future, we need to really look at that 8% and our contributions towards that and how we can reduce it. As we also already know, if we want to keep our emissions below 1.5 degrees warming as recommended by the IPCC, we have less than 12 years to make that difference. So this decade is the decade for action in tourism. This was mentioned as well in the first webinar, but it's very important to reiterate, and it's links to how you can look at reducing your emissions. For every 1 degree the planet warms, we see 7% more moisture in the atmosphere. Therefore, taking efforts to reduce our carbon footprint benefits the stability of our planet, but also the tourism economy, because the cost of doing nothing is massive. Think about the disruption that 7% more moisture brings to our businesses. That's stronger storms, more unpredictable weather events, heavier rains, flooding, and more serious droughts, and higher risk of fire. So we know we have less than 12 years to make a difference. So it's important to start thinking about your future as a business and how you're going to transition to a low carbon operations. And it's also important to think about your strategies aligning with this time frame. So as you develop your carbon reduction plan, you may think about the next decade. You may think about it in 3-year segments, looking at short-term wins, medium-term, and long-term changes to your business. So something to keep in mind as a background piece to developing your carbon reduction strategy. As more tourism operators get serious about embedding low carbon strategies into their operations, we'll be able to alleviate the kinds of risks that we already are seeing today in our tourism economy. We know that fires are disrupting our market. They're creating seasonal fluctuations that we can't anticipate, and fires are becoming synonymous with summer. And that is something that we'll be able to mitigate when we implement these reduction strategies. This is a picture of my hometown in Grand Forks that experienced a very traumatic flood, followed by fire events in the same region. So we're seeing major disruption in both small communities and urban areas. And again, this shut down our entire downtown. So we're really looking at serious disruption to our communities. And just another reason why we need to all work together to create low carbon strategies and really embed that as a part of our business practices to become resilient for the future, but also to ensure our entire industry and communities are resilient in the future. So let's dig into the nitty-gritty. At this stage, if you have explored your carbon footprint, you should recognize what's included in the scope of your inventory. So scope 1 includes your direct emissions from, say, natural gas, gasoline, marine diesel, refrigerants, anything that is combusted on site. Your scope 2 areas present opportunities to reduce emissions from electricity or other indirect emissions. And scope 3 is usually a big one. It includes all business travel, staff commuting, paper, waste, and shipping. In scope 3, you would be looking at working with your suppliers, your employees, your customers to implement further strategies outside your direct control, but can have a big impact on reducing emissions. So thinking about this in the different types of businesses in tourism, if you're a tour operator, you're likely going to have a large fleet of vehicles that you either lease or own. Your scope 1 emissions for gasoline and diesel are going to be quite large, and that will likely be your area of focus. However, if you are an event center, your scope 2 emissions surrounding electricity are probably going to be a large part of your carbon footprint. So those are just a couple of examples of where you might focus. If you are a hotel, you may be looking more at heating costs and the emissions associated with natural gas in order to heat your building. So once you have an idea of your carbon footprint, it'll show you where you can focus in order to make the biggest impact. So your next step, once you have a good idea of your carbon footprint, is to look at setting targets and keep in mind that 12-year time frame. So your first step is to review that carbon footprint and compare it to some industry averages that are out there. And you can look at industry averages such as what is the average grams of carbon per room night in hotels, or what is the average emissions associated with a single passenger on a bus tour. And try to benchmark your performance against industry averages, and you can use that to help you set your targets. It's also important to reflect on the climate action targets already set by the IPCC. In Canada, we have a goal to reduce emissions by 30% from 2005 levels to 2030. So that can also give you a bit of a benchmark, and you can align with those targets in order to reduce your own carbon footprint. Thirdly, you might want to look at how you are going to be measuring your future performance. Are you going to be measuring it on an absolute basis or an intensity basis? So an example of an absolute metric may be our emissions are 550 tons per year. We want to get that to below 400 by 2025. An intensity-based metric might be used if your business is anticipating significant growth over the next 10 years. So an example of that could be you want to reduce your carbon footprint per room night from 5 kilograms to 3 kilograms by 2030. So deciding on how you're going to be measuring your performance in the future is important to set at the outset. We would strongly encourage you to publish a target publicly and share that with your staff and make that part of how you are measuring your business's success. And publishing a public target also starts a conversation within your industry to say, hey, here's our goal. This is what we're working towards. And it just helps raise the bar among your industry peers. And lastly, of course, you want to be creating an implementation plan and rally your team around that. So we'll go into that more in a few slides. Getting into the benefits for reducing your carbon footprint. Oftentimes, staff have to make the case to business owners or their finance team to say, here's why this is an important part of our business strategy. And obviously, the first one is tackling climate change. Mitigating the effects from your operations on climate change is important for the future of our industry. But investing in the low carbon future is also important to future-proof your business. There's an anticipation of higher carbon taxes, further regulation in tourism. So if you are aligning your operations with the 2030 agendas for sustainable development, you are future-proofing your business. And the most obvious is reducing operational costs. There are so many areas of tackling your carbon footprint that have a positive impact on your long-term operational costs. Reducing energy, reducing transportation expenses, reducing purchasing, reducing food waste. And we'll go into more of those examples later. And the fourth one of the most important ones in tourism, is attracting and retaining top talent. We know that the workforce of the future is very values driven, and they want to work somewhere where their values are in action. There's more and more content at the university, high school, and even elementary school level that teaches the young workforce about sustainability values. And they want to enter the workforce using those and working somewhere that aligns with that, where they can feel like they are making a difference. And we know from some of the businesses we have worked with, when they start to embed sustainability values into their job descriptions, they're getting more and better applicants. So this can also have a positive impact on your HR department. Next, we want to share with you some industry trends. We've mentioned the Drawdown book. This is one of our favorite resources for thinking about how we can take a measurable impact on climate change. It's one of the most comprehensive guides for specific initiatives and current technologies we already have to reduce our carbon footprint. So under the energy category, we are seeing more businesses implement solar PV. So this is solar for generation of electricity, different than solar thermal. Solar PV is a really important initiative to consider if your business is based in an energy grid that has a high global warming potential. So we're looking at places that might have natural gas or coal-fired energy as a part of their energy grid. Solar can be very powerful for reducing your carbon footprint. And you would know that from doing your emissions associated with Scope 2 electricity. Some other trends include geothermal energy. This can be particularly attractive for new developments or major renovations or add-ons to existing facilities, things like event centers, large hotels, airports. And geothermal energy is not necessarily always ground source. It can also be marine or water source. So this is a heat exchange system that removes and distributes heat through a natural resource like an ocean, water, or ground. It could even be referred to as air source as well. Waste to energy, this is another trend that we're seeing where waste is being either incinerated in order to generate energy, specifically waste that is really hard to recycle in your region. And that can be a way to reduce the carbon footprint associated with that waste decomposing and turning into methane. Instead, it's generating electricity and reducing your need for electricity or heat from other sources such as a heavy carbon electricity grid or a natural gas boiler. Solar thermal is one that sometimes is tough to generate a good return on investment for unless you have a large and consistent heat demand for hot water, such as large hot water tanks or especially pools or hot tubs. Solar thermal can have a really good return on investment in those cases, and definitely something to consider in Canada. Food, this one is a big one, and we're learning more and more about how our food chains contribute to our global carbon footprint. So here are a few specific initiatives from Drawdown that tourism operators can look at implementing. Plant-rich menus. We've heard a lot about the carbon footprint associated with meat. It is one of the most potent greenhouse gases, and it also contributes to deforestation at a very large scale. So not only do you have the methane production from the digestion of ruminants, like cows, but you also have the loss of carbon sinks, such as forests and old growth. So your action there can be designing a menu that is plant-rich, and doesn't necessarily have to be a vegan or vegetarian menu, but we recommend limiting the red meat within the menu to less than 20%. This can have a big impact on your carbon footprint in your Scope 3. Reducing food waste. This is another trend that we are seeing throughout large hotel chains who are internally conducting audits to figure out how they can reduce their food waste and also in turn reduce their costs. Food costs are going up across the board due to things related to climate change, such as drought, fires, blights, and other incidences. So reducing food waste will have a direct impact on reducing your carbon footprint, but also reducing your costs. Supporting permaculture farming is also an action you can take if you have a food service. You can look at your supply chain and support local farms that are implementing permaculture practices. If you don't know much about permaculture, I recommend checking it out. But as a quick reference, much conventional or industrial scale farming uses tilling practices which churn up the soil and contribute to greenhouse gases being added to the atmosphere. Permaculture farming often uses layering techniques in the soil, so you're getting those nutrients from a natural source, they're being locked into the soil, and you also start to get carbon sequestration in that soil. And there's more and more research coming out about how permaculture farming can be one of the top initiatives to curb global warming. So even if you support 1 or 3 farms that are using those practices in your community or in your region, that can have a big impact. And of course, composting. And this is different for every region. The availability of service providers or a regional facility in order to compost. But even if your community does not necessarily have an easily accessible composting system, you can look at in-house systems such as digesters or incineration in some cases, but it's worth looking into the different technology that you can use in order to compost your food waste. Of course, if you reduce your food waste in the first place, your volume of composting will be less, which is another co-benefit. Next, buildings and land use. So new construction, there are major trends towards net zero buildings that essentially produce zero carbon footprint at the end of the day, or use net zero energy due to a contribution from alternative energy such as solar, combined with very efficient building design and good envelope construction and systems such as heat exchangers within your buildings. There's plenty of new guidelines for new construction, and they often have a strong payback. They may have a slight premium in the beginning, perhaps 3 to 10% in the new construction. However, the long-term cost savings are there for reduced energy, natural gas, and other costs associated with operating that building in the long term. So if you're building a new hotel, you may want to look at net zero energy design for your building. HVAC is one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gases in Canada within buildings, especially if you have a natural gas or other fossil fuel fired boiler. Your carbon footprint is going to be very large for your HVAC system. So it's worth having an engineering team come in and provide efficiency upgrade recommendations to that system and do some long-term planning for changing out certain components in order to burn less fossil fuels and have a more efficient heating ventilation system. Also in buildings and land use, landscaping is very important for reducing your carbon footprint. So what we're looking at here is a focus on native gardens where you can have less pesticides, water and maintenance costs, and support local biodiversity. And in water use, it's important to consider as well, although water doesn't have a large carbon footprint often, the emissions associated with heating water do. So water efficiency in tap aerators, shower heads, washing of vehicles can contribute to reducing your carbon footprint as well. In transportation, there's definitely a trend nationwide towards electrification or hybrids in ground vehicles and tour transportation. And even in marine engines, we are seeing more marine tour operators adopting electric outboard engines for when they're cruising in certain areas. And that just allows you to turn off the diesel or gas engine and ride on an efficient electric engine, which also reduces the sound during that part of the trip, as well as emissions. Employee commuting is often a large one, really depending on where you're located and where your staff are located. A good first step in employee commuting is to complete a survey of your staff to understand where they're coming from. And from there, you can facilitate carpooling or look at increasing cycling infrastructure or other initiatives in order to reduce employee commuting. And of course, business travel. What we usually recommend for business travel is to adopt a policy for when meetings are attended in person and when they can be done by video conference, with the goal of reducing business travel by between 10 to 20%. And of course, this can have an impact on costs as well and generate some savings. And finally, under materials and waste, we're seeing more understanding about how the circular economy can relate to tourism, and adopting this lens in your purchasing and your material flows can help you reduce costs and your carbon footprint associated with the materials you buy. And a circular economy is one that is opposite of a linear economy. So a linear economy is based on the take, make, waste model. So what you buy is essentially destined for landfill. It's not designed to be broken down and recycled. It's not necessarily designed to be repaired or have a long life. Whereas a circular economy looks at material flows as a continual stream of either being able to be repaired or recycled or have another use at the end of its life. This can apply to something like furniture purchasing. when you're buying a table, can it be deconstructed and recycled at the end of its life? Can it be repaired? What are those materials made of? Are they made of recycled components in the first place? So adopting a circular economy lens to your material flows can help reduce your impact on the environment. And that applies to all of the products below: electronics, paper products, furniture, etc. In paper products, ideally, you'll be able to limit your paper use as much as possible through developing digital systems in your business. But if you are going to purchase paper products, we recommend really focusing on limiting the size of that paper as much as possible for something, say a pamphlet, and also purchasing 100% post-consumer paper so that it's made of recycled content and it can be recycled at the end of its life. So next, we'd like to share with you a few case studies of businesses that we've worked with that have effectively reduced their carbon footprint. So starting with a coffee roaster, and then we'll give you an example from a fast food restaurant, whale watching company, hotel, and a tour operator under the transportation sector. So Outring Coffee and Tea was one of our first clients, and we've been working with them for over 10 years to measure and reduce their carbon footprint. They've seen significant growth over this time, but as you can see from the diagrams here, they've almost reduced their carbon footprint by 50%, and their annual emissions have been continually reducing every year. And this is from a lot of small efforts, such as changing those paper practices, improving recycling, the next vehicle they buy, maybe they focus on the most efficient vehicle they can buy for that use. So all of these small initiatives that they've made by adopting a low carbon lens have contributed to reducing their carbon footprint significantly. With the remainder of their carbon footprint that they have every year, they purchase carbon offsets in order to mitigate the remainder of their carbon footprint. So they have been a carbon neutral company since 2009. Another one of our favorite examples is Big Will Burger. When we first met with this restaurant, they said, we want to create a burger joint that is like a classic burger joint, but we want it to be as sustainable as possible. And this infographic shows some of their initiatives here. So they essentially have been working every year, similar to Outra, to reduce their carbon footprint. But as you can see, they have other initiatives as well, such as edible gardens outside of their restaurant. They compost everything on the trays. So all of their everything that they purchase is 100% compostable. And that compost is used as soil in the urban gardens that they have. And similarly, their fryer oil is recycled into biodiesel, which then fuels their trucks. So lots of innovative initiatives, as well as some conventional ones, such as maintaining efficient kitchen operations, lighting, and getting as close to zero waste as possible in that restaurant. Another example in the marine tourism sector is from Eagle Wing Tours. This company has won several awards for environmental excellence for their sustainability program, which focuses on low carbon operations, but also areas such as education and engagement, focusing on the customer experience and embedding ecological education about conservation and the marine ecosystems into their tours, and also working within their industry to help raise the bar and show other tour operators how they can make a difference and become a low carbon operation themselves. Inn at Laurel Point is a hotel that we've been working with for a number of years, and they've seen some great metrics. They've reduced their carbon footprint by 21% since 2013. They've been carbon neutral now for 9 years. They've also been very focused on their waste diversion rate in the past 2 years, and they have increased that from 48% to 77% of their waste is now going to composting and recycling. And a big part of that was introducing in-room composting. So bringing those services that they use in their kitchens to their guests and just helping divert as much waste away from the landfill as possible. And as you can see, they do produce these infographics to share with their guests, their staff, and the industry what their performance is and what they're working on. And that transparency is really important to help the industry raise the bar and generate that link between your brand and your values. And next, we have the Wilsons Group. And again, you can see by their infographic here that they've been focused on reducing their emissions, starting with the conversion of a double-decker bus to fully electric. So that not only reduces emissions significantly from the operation of the vehicle, but also alleviated the need to buy a brand new vehicle and all of the embedded carbon emissions in the materials to build a new bus. Also, coach transportation in general, we found to have 76% fewer emissions in traveling by car. So they're supporting low emissions transportation just in how they operate and their fleet, and promoting that as a solution to travelers to reduce their carbon footprint. They support a number of nonprofits and groups in the community, and in their offices, they've recently eliminated single-use plastics in their kitchens, worked on energy efficiency upgrades, water conservation, and working on initiatives such as eliminating bottled water. So again, lots of small initiatives that can make a big impact. So you've heard about a few examples from other companies. We've talked about some major trends, but all of us in tourism have our day jobs, and how do we decide where to start? So for selecting your focus area, we recommend looking at your highest return on investment. So you want to look at it from two lenses at the same time. Where can I generate the most carbon reductions, and where can I generate the most cost savings? You may want to consider conducting a sustainability assessment from a professional service provider to really get into the nitty-gritty of your return on investment for different water, energy, and waste related initiatives. But once you have that analysis done, you can choose those initiatives that are going to give you that best ROI and invest in those first. Another lens to put on is relevancy. Do you need to upgrade any equipment in the next year? Are there any renovations planned? How can I integrate these carbon reduction strategies with other initiatives that are happening in my business? Rather than creating an entirely new program, how do I just fit this into our capital planning and resource planning? And can these changes solve any other pain points? So for example, if you have customer complaints about drafts and the room's too hot, the room's too cold, it might be time to upgrade your HVAC and control system anyways. And in doing so, you can look at how do I get the best building automation system in here so that we can generate some energy savings as well as making the guests more comfortable. The second question we get a lot, of course, is who's going to do this? There's a lot to be done. We have to conduct analyses. We have to be engaging our staff. We have to be doing planning. How do you create that capacity for change? Obviously, it's important to have set aside time within a job description, within one employee or multiple employees' job descriptions for this. And that can create dividends if the company structures it in a way that there are some measures associated with it, like achieving efficiencies and energy savings and waste reduction. And we usually focus on these three pillars for engaging employees as a whole. So first, you want to be educating your staff. So once you have this data about what your carbon footprint is and what your opportunities are to reduce, bring that to a staff meeting, show that to your entire team, and get them to weigh in on what they feel the opportunities are. And that will empower them to make changes within their own roles and within their own departments in your business. Furthermore, you want to create some mechanism for continued engagement, whether that's a digital platform for sharing ideas and sharing results, or a standing meeting that happens once a quarter. There's lots of opportunities for engaging your staff continually, but it is important that it's not just a one-off. So how do you create accountability for sustainability in order to ensure that it's not just a side of desk kind of initiative? You can start by creating a green team that has members from different departments or even members from outside the community, such as some local nonprofits that can help you with your sustainability objectives. Changing job descriptions, so in certain roles, especially in sort of facilities and maintenance and management, having duties that reflect what your goals are and what your targets are for emissions reductions. We also recommend putting a standard statement in job descriptions that says what you stand for as a business, your sustainability values, and your mission as a company. And that'll help you attract the right staff who are going to be coming to your business for those reasons. You can also look at embedding staff incentives and performance metrics associated with hitting certain targets. An example would be a brewery where the brewmaster gets a bonus for achieving a certain level of water reductions. That business is going to save a lot on those water bills, and so there's a bonus there for helping to reach those targets. And creating space on standing agendas at all levels of the business. So looking at executive, management, and department teams, creating a standing agenda item so that anything regarding sustainability initiatives, can be addressed in a good change management approach in your business. You may also be wondering, how am I going to resource these efforts? Fortunately, in Canada, there are several hiring and wage subsidy grants available to your business if you are looking to hire specifically for sustainability positions. And those grants range from $2,800 to $15,000 per employee. So you can look at utilizing those in order to help you with your first years of getting that position into place and validating that position in your budget. And of course, creating a specific budget for sustainability related initiatives that will generate long-term cost savings in your annual planning can help create room for those initiatives that have a really good return on investment. Another trend we're seeing in resourcing is to add in small eco fees into your hotel stays or into your per passenger tour costs. And those eco fees can go towards certain sustainability initiatives, or they can be donated externally to conservation efforts that relate to your area of business. For tracking results, it's definitely important to choose a few key metrics and designate that accountability and reporting to those roles that will have responsibility for that. And as a company, you can look at either annual, quarterly, or monthly reporting on those key metrics. So that might be, say, kilowatt hours per square foot if you're a hotel. It may be around fuel per passenger used if you are a tour operator. So choosing those metrics that are really going to be levers in your business and relate to your business operations are important. And then building some kind of monitoring tool. And a monitoring tool could be as simple as an Excel spreadsheet to track those key performance indicators. But you may also find that in your business, you need more sub-metering in order to get the data that you want for water or for electricity, and then adopt a continual monitoring program. So once you have that data, who is it reported to and who monitors and enforces those goals that you have? In Synergy, we've developed a program that we call AIM, which is for assessment, implementation, and monitoring continually, where we develop reports for business on a quarterly basis, and we flag where they're at with regards to the key performance indicators and give recommendations on how they can change. So that could be something that you can adopt internally into your own business as well, kind of mimic that sort of model. So in a nutshell, how do you reach your goals? Adopt a low carbon lens to the decisions that you make on a daily basis in your tourism business. And those collection of everyday choices and decisions can lead to bigger change over time, as we saw in those case studies. It may seem simple to just change out lighting or, replace one vehicle with one that's slightly more efficient, but over the course of the next 12 years to take action, all those small efforts and decisions can contribute to reducing your carbon footprint as a whole. And of course, play the long game. Set a BHAG goal for your organization that is strong, that is motivating, and sets itself out at 5 to 10 year marks. So thank you very much for taking the time today to learn about ways to reduce your carbon footprint. I hope you've taken away a few key actions or strategies for your business. If you've enjoyed this webinar, you can listen to our third one from Heidi Grantner on how you can restore your carbon footprint, looking at innovative ways to contribute to conservation or invest in offsets, and she'll get more into what that offset market looks like. If you'd like to connect with us, you can email us, or if you have questions with regards to the content that we had on this deck or the other webinars, you can book a one-on-one call with my colleague Kaylee through the link there. Thank you for joining us.